Hey class, this section specifically is going to be mission critical for you guys in understanding really a lot of the rest of the semester for exercise physiology, as well as kind of moving on in kinesiology as far as how the body signals to other parts of the body to start figuring out what the heck it needs to be doing. I highly recommend that you're reading along in your textbook. So let's first start off by talking about hormones. What are hormones? Why do we need hormones? The works, right? So essentially hormones are going to be functioning almost like male men or male women, if you will. They're going to be functioning as chemical messengers that are going to be providing a signal to a tissue that is located somewhere else in the body. They could be very close, or it could be sending a signal to your big toe or something like that, right? Like the distance that the hormone is traveling can be great. They're going to be largely transported through the blood system. There's different ways that we can transport hormones, really, but for the most part, we're going to be controlling hormone flow with the blood circulation, which is what we're going to be talking about next week and how we control circulation. If you go back a couple of weeks to when we were in class first, we talked a little bit about if you have a lion coming through the door or a bear coming through the door, how are you going to respond to that? What energy systems are you going to utilize, and how are you going to control fueling for those energy systems? And this is where hormones are really playing a role. One of their big functions is that they're going to be serving as the initiators of the fight or flight response. They're really going to be serving an adaptive response to exercise, and then they're really going to be manipulating fuel flow and fuel utilization. That way we can make sure that not only do we get away from the bear or the lion or whatever the heck it is, but you also have the correct amount of energy to continue getting away from the lion as long as it's chasing you. Largely, there's three primary classes of hormones. They're going to be based on the structure of the hormone. They're amino acid derived, peptide derived, and then steroid hormones, which are going to be our cholesterol or lipid based hormones. The field or the science of, right? Ology means science of. The science of neuroendocrinology is essentially looking at the way that our nervous system interfaces with our endocrine system. And what you'll see over the next couple of slides is that there's a high level of interdependence and concomitance between the neural system and the endocrinological system. So the primary difference is going to be in their transmission of signal. So the neural system is going to be neurotransmitters and electricity, whereas the endocrine system is going to be a hormone release or a cascading of events that causes a later effect. A lot of these times it's going to be released into the tissue or into the circulation to then diffuse or move to a different distal tissue to then exert its effect. So neural system, think neurotransmitters, synaptic signaling. Endocrine system is using a group of male delivery workers to actually send that signal or transmit that signal across the body. So if we know that the endocrine system is predominantly going to be using the blood as a transport vehicle, as its delivery truck, right, then we need to know how the amount that's inside the blood is going to regulate the signal of the hormone. What we generally know is that the concentration of the hormone present in the blood is going to be one of the biggest factors in how well it's able to elicit its effect or its target response or its goal response. How does the body control, how does the body control that blood hormone concentration? Because if we want higher numbers inside the blood to elicit an effect, then we need to make sure that we're actually putting that higher number into the blood system. So it's largely going to be controlled by two mechanisms. They're going to have rates of secretions and then rates of metabolisms. There's a couple of sub-aims within there, subcategories within there. Transport protein quantity and plasma volume changes. So one of the primary ways that our endocrine system is going to control the concentration of hormone inside of the blood is it's going to be able to manipulate the rate of secretion from that specific endocrine gland. So think of it like this. If you want to make money or make lots of money, what's one of the best ways that you can make a lot of money? Make money faster or make more money up front. Same thing is going on with rate of secretion from an endocrine gland. So the greater the rate, the greater the production of the hormone from the endocrine gland, and the greater the ability of it to release that hormone into the blood at higher volumes, the higher the concentration is going to be in the blood. Common sense, but it's how the body works, right? It's logical and it's rational. The rate of secretion from the endocrine gland is going to be driven by a couple of different things, but predominantly it's going to be driven by the magnitude of the input. So the endocrine gland itself is going to be receiving an input from another body system or another tissue. And then based on the amount of stimulatory or inhibitory signaling to that endocrine gland, it's going to regulate how much endocrine or how much hormone it's going to be producing, and then how much hormone is actually going to be dumping into the blood. A great example of this multifactorial input, or this ability of endocrine glands to receive stimulatory or inhibitory input from various tissues of origin or various sources, is going to be the pancreas. If we look at insulin secretion, which we'll talk about later, and insulin signaling we'll also talk about, but if we look at the pancreas, it's able to receive signal from plasma glucose levels, amino acids in the blood, but then it's also able to receive hormonal signals from epinephrine, as well as sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system innervation. So the pancreas, one of the key endocrine glands within the body, is able to receive and interpret signals from all these different sources of origin. So it's almost like the pancreas is multilingual, and it's able to speak different languages and understand different languages in order to be able to respond best to a specific scenario. So we have the rate of secretion or production. Another way that we're going to control how much hormone is inside the blood is going to be how fast we either break it down or how fast we eliminate it from our body system. So that's the rate at which we break something down is going to be called the rate of metabolism, and the rate at which we get rid of it or lose it from the system is going to be the rate of excretion. One of the primary ways that we actually control the rate of excretion is going to be through the kidneys. The kidneys are able to filter and remove products from the blood through the urine in very high levels. One of the interesting things about the kidneys during exercise is that they actually have a restricted blood flow to them. And one of the cool things about exercise is that we actually increase the half-life of a lot of different hormones and endocrine signals because the kidneys are not able to excrete hormones at fast enough rates because of a restricted blood flow. So we're actually going to see that the concentration of hormones in the blood during exercise are going to be manipulated specifically because of the exercise environment that's going on. So the previous two slides, we talked about how fast or how much we're putting into the blood for a hormone, and then how fast we're eliminating that hormone from the blood via excretion or metabolism. Another factor that we have to play in here is how are we actually transporting that hormone through the blood? Is it being transported in a free form, or is it being transported in a bound form? A great example of this is going to be testosterone. Testosterone, for the most part, when it's circulating through the blood, is going to be bound up. And when testosterone is bound, it's actually attached to another protein, and it's unable to exert its effect. So bound testosterone has no biological effect. However, the half-life of the testosterone in the blood is significantly increased because of its binding nature, because of the fact that it's actually bound. So the degree to which hormones are bound is going to affect, one, their presence in the blood, but two, their biological activity at the same time. And then the rate at which these hormones get bound up to transport proteins is going to be due to the affinity as well as the concentration of the transport protein. If we have high levels of transport protein and low levels of hormone present in the blood, the majority of the hormone will get bound up as soon as it enters. If we have the opposite, we have high levels of hormone and low levels of transport protein, you would expect to see higher levels of free hormone floating through. Additionally, if the transport protein is not really a good friend of the hormone, it's not a good match, then you're not going to see those two things bind super often. So realistically, the past three slides have really been focused on the hormone itself, on the signal itself. Now let's talk about the medium through which that signal is being transported, and that's going to be our blood. if we affect the solvent, if we affect the vector by which we're transporting the hormone, then of course we're going to affect the ability of the hormone to exert its force, to exert its power, to really share its signal. Think of it like this. If you're a FedEx driver or you're an Amazon driver and you're trying to deliver a package, but the roads are really small and there's a bunch of cars on the road, are you going to be able to get to the house fast? Or you're a pizza delivery person. Are you going to be able to get to the house fast if the roads are all clogged up? No. If there's not a good road for you to get from point A to point B, are you going to get there fast? No, you're not. Are you going to be able to be efficient? No, you're not, right? So when it comes to plasma volume, essentially what we're doing is we're using our blood, our vascular system as a highway, as a road system in order to get our hormone from point A to point B. If anything we do to affect that blood, whether it's volume changes, its viscosity, whatever, is going to affect the ability of the hormone to exert its effect, right? So if we have a change in plasma volume for an increase or a decrease, we're going to have the inverse response for the hormone concentration. If we increase the plasma volume, if we increase the amount of blood present, and we maintain the amount of hormone that's been released, then we're going to have a decrease in concentration. If we decrease the amount of volume but maintain the amount of hormone that's being released, we're going to have an increase in hormone concentration. We can control this plasma volume through renal functions, through the use of the kidneys and other factors that our body will play. But largely, by and large, our plasma volume tends to be fairly set, right? Like we have a fixed amount of blood within our body. We have a fixed amount of fluid within our body for the most part. What's interesting is that during exercise, we actually have shifts that occur in the fluid compartment of our body, in the plasma volume that's being read in our body. So let's say that you're working with an athlete and you're doing routine blood draws on the athlete around the time of exercise. Well, based on the fluid shifts that you'll learn about later in the semester, you'll see that the hormone concentrations and the plasma concentrations of certain markers inside of the blood are going to look incredibly high. They're going to look like they're super concentrated during exercise. And the reason is that there's a fluid shift that occurs. So if we want to kind of take and make those numbers contemporary, or make those numbers more realistic and more accurate, if you will, you actually have to take and put a correction factor onto that blood volume in order to make the hormone concentration seem correct, right? So the next videos, we're going to go a little bit more into how these hormones exert their effects, not just how they're transported, but how they're actually going to be exerting their effects.